We met through an online dating website, met with each other, and fell in love. His name is Reynold. After 3 months of dating, we planned a trip to this scenic spot, a hill station. Arriving there, we found that the hotel we booked was closed by the government authority due to fire and safety issue. It was getting dark and we had to find another room. Most of the hotels were full because it was peak tourist season. Finally, we found a motel, a little far away from the spot. This was our only choice. The neon sign flickered ominously as we pulled into the parking lot of the deserted motel. It was late and we were tired from hours of driving, but the sight of the rundown building gave me pause. Despite my reservations, I had no choice but to spend the night there. And then suddenly we had another problem. His car showed some trouble and smoke rose from inside. Fortunately, we were already in the parking area. As we entered the lobby, a chill swept through me, sending shivers down my spine. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and a sense of unease settled over me like a suffocating blanket. A very dirty smell came from the motel. We approached the front desk, where a solitary figure stood in the dimly lit room. His eyes bore into mine with an intensity that made my blood run cold. With a voice like gravel, he handed us a rusty key and muttered something about room 13. Reynold told me he wanted to go to the nearby town to find a mechanic. I told him that I would also go with him, but he told me that it was not safe. He wanted me to stay here. I reluctantly agreed with him. I made my way down the labyrinthine corridors, the floorboards groaning beneath my feet. When I reached room 13, I hesitated for a moment before unlocking the door and stepping inside. The room was musty and dimly lit, and the furniture was draped in tattered sheets. As I settled into bed, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every creak of the floorboards and every whisper of the wind outside seemed to echo with a sinister presence. Just as I began to drift off to sleep, a loud banging sound echoed through the room, causing me to jolt upright in bed. Heart pounding, I searched the room for the source of the noise but found nothing amiss. As the night wore on, the disturbances grew more frequent. Strange shadows flickered across the walls. Whispers echoed in the darkness, and I felt like the temperature plummeted to icy depths. After waiting for him for a long time, I fell asleep. I woke up hearing a rustling sound from a masked man standing near my bed. He was staring at me and then reached out to grab me. I could see his red eyes through the mask. Either he is a maniac or a possessed man. Terrified and desperate for escape, I made a dash for the door, only to find it locked from the outside. Panic surged through me as I pounded on the door, screaming for help, but my cries were met with silence. "Who are you?" I asked him, but got no reply. In a last-ditch effort to break free, I hurled myself against the door with all my strength, and the old door finally gave in. With a final desperate lunge, I broke through, stumbling into the deserted hallway beyond. Right at this time, my boyfriend came back with the mechanic and was standing in the lobby. After hearing my story, he was so angry that he went to the reception and demanded the CCTV footage, but we were told that the surveillance cameras were not working. We then went to our room to check for the person, but found no one there. The receptionist told me that it may only be my imagination, but I was sure that there was a person. We told him that we wanted to call the police. He begged us not to file complaint, as he would be caught for not maintaining the CCTV. After discussing for a while, we decided not to complain because I did not inform my home about us going on a trip, but we did not stay there for the day. We got our car repaired and went back that day itself. If you find the content interesting, please subscribe. We move on to our next story. I never thought my foray into online dating would turn into a nightmare. After my first breakup, I was so depressed, and my friend Maria recommended online dating to pull me out of this state, swiping through profiles, exchanging messages, the usual routine. Then I got some matches. We went on casual outings and had tea or coffee. Some people try to get you to the hotel. I escaped from it every time. But the first person I took seriously was Jake. I knew him before. He was my senior at college, but we seldom spoke with each other back then. I decided to give this a try. At first, Jake seemed like the perfect guy. He was charming and funny, and his messages made me smile. We hit it off right away, and before I knew it, we were making plans to meet in person. I remember the anticipation as I waited for him at the cafe we agreed to meet at. When he finally walked in, he looked just like his pictures, tall, with a warm smile that put me at ease. It was very nostalgic to see him again after so many years. We vibed very well at first, and then we exchanged our phone numbers and used to call every day. The relationship progressed to a stage where I was seriously considering introducing him to my home. One day, he invited me to go on a trip to a private resort in a tourist spot. He told me that it belonged to his friend and we could stay there without paying any money. I hesitated at first, but after he repeatedly persuaded me, I agreed. We started the next day in the evening. I was so happy to be with him. The trip was very relaxing. His car was a BMW, which was quite comfortable and spacious. Around nighttime, we reached a scenic spot where we had dinner. Then, I received a call and talked for about 5 minutes. It was an urgent call from my cousin Jose informing me about my grandmother's illness. She was hospitalized again. After ending the call, I was about to tell him about my grandmother's illness, but I could see that he was very angry. He asked me in an angry voice, "Who is this, Jose? If you want to speak to him, you could do it at home, right?" I wanted to say that he was my cousin, but Jake gave me no chance to explain. He asked invasive questions, probing into my personal life with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. Still, I brushed it off, trying to give him the benefit of the doubt. The important thing was to end the trip here, as I wanted to visit my grandmother. I told him, "Jake, I want to go back." But before I could speak anymore, Jake suggested we take a walk in the nearby park. I hesitated for a moment but agreed, hoping a change of scenery would lighten the mood. But as we walked, Jake's demeanor shifted. He started talking about our future together, marriage, children, as if we were already a couple. It felt surreal, like he was living in a different reality altogether. I tried to politely excuse myself, but that's when things took a dark turn. Jake's grip on my arm tightened, and his eyes filled with a disturbing intensity that sent chills down my spine. Panic surged through me as I realized I was in danger. He then began to question me with more intensity and then pinned me to a nearby tree. I wanted to shout, but somehow I couldn't. He took a pocket knife and put it on my throat. This frightened me to my core. I never expected him to carry a knife with him. I felt the coldness of the knife and knew it was almost impossible for me to escape if he wanted to kill me. Just as all hope had ended, the waiter at the restaurant came to us with the bill. He thought that we had forgotten to pay. Hearing his footsteps, Jake was stunned for a moment. Right at that time, I managed to break free and ran towards the nearest street, where I flagged down a passing car. Thankfully, the driver was kind enough to take me to the police station, where I reported the incident. It turned out Jake had a history of stalking and harassment, with multiple restraining orders against him. The whole experience left me shaken to the core. I never imagined that a simple date could turn into a nightmare, and that too with someone I knew before. From that day on, I swore off online dating, vowing to be more cautious in the future. If you find the content interesting, please subscribe. My name's Emily, and I never thought a simple date would turn into a nightmare straight out of a horror movie. But that's exactly what happened one fateful night in the gritty streets of Detroit. I wanted to study in some big city, but my grade was not very good, and the financial situation of my family was also another factor I had to take into consideration. If I want to live in a big city, my next best choice was Detroit. I love Detroit. It is a dangerous city, but I have never lived in a large city that was not dangerous. So I was forced to study here at a small academy. Seeing my depression, my roommate arranged a date for me to relieve my pressure and have some fun. She started an online dating account for me. I had agreed to meet Mark, a guy I'd been chatting with online, at a dive bar on the outskirts of the city. The neon signs flickered in the darkness as I made my way through the deserted streets, and the sound of distant sirens echoed in the night. As I approached the bar, a sense of unease washed over me. The building loomed like a shadow in the darkness, its windows boarded up and its walls covered in graffiti. But I pushed aside my doubts, eager to see if the chemistry we'd shared online would translate into real life. I was not looking for a one-night thing. I saw a good partner in Mark because the way he spoke was gentlemanly, and he was also very knowledgeable. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of stale beer and cigarette smoke, and the dim lighting cast long shadows across the room. Mark was waiting for me at the bar, a predatory smile playing on his lips as he beckoned me over. The atmosphere was very different from what I imagined. I was longing for a romantic atmosphere. I sat down opposite him with some unease. We exchanged pleasantries as we sipped our drinks, but there was an undercurrent of tension beneath the surface. Mark's eyes darted around the room, his demeanor tense and guarded, as if he were expecting trouble at any moment. His questioning entered very private areas, including my body. His gaze was perverted. I felt the vibration of a psycho from him. I tried to steer the conversation to safer topics, but Mark seemed fixated on darker subjects, things no one should ever discuss on a first date. I felt a knot form in the pit of my stomach as he probed into my past, his questions becoming more invasive with each passing moment. And then, just as I was about to make my excuses and leave, he leaned in close, his breath hot against my ear, as he whispered something that made my blood run cold. I felt my consciousness fade away. Surely my drinks were poisoned. I wanted to stay awake, but my eyes disobeyed me. I asked Mark to leave me, but I got no reply. Again, I demanded in a more commanding manner, but he laughed. I tried to push past him to make a run for the door, but he grabbed my arm with a vice-like grip, his fingers digging into my skin like talons. "Mark, leave me," I told him angrily. "Nope," he said in a mocking voice. "I will call the police," I said, but he gave me no reply. He just laughed like a maniac. I screamed for help, but the other patrons just watched in silence, their faces twisted with indifference or perhaps something far more sinister. Finally, I fell unconscious. I felt like falling into hell and being with the devil. The person I thought was a gentleman was the actual devil. I felt like I was being dragged into a dimly lit room. I can't remember the situation because I was not in my right mind. And then, just when all hope seemed lost, a figure appeared in the doorway, a beacon of light in the darkness. A very rough-looking man was drawn by the commotion. His presence was enough to send Mark scrambling for the exit. So this was the reason for Mark's tense demeanor earlier when I came in. I wanted to ask who he was, but I didn't wait for that because I still don't know whether he is here to save me or someone even more sinister than Mark. I stumbled out into the night, shaken but alive, the echoes of that harrowing encounter still ringing in my ears. I was thankful to that person, but I did not stay there for another moment. I stopped a taxi and went straight to my room. I wanted to tell my parents about the incident, but my friend told me to keep quiet and forget about the episode. If you find the content interesting, please subscribe. Also send your horror stories and experiences to palacehorror@gmail.com.